Welcome everyone to the Microsoft security best practices. We'll try to present a Microsoft overview of the best practices that span across all the portfolio, or at least that span these most important parts in Microsoft portfolio, like Azure, Office 365 tenants, and in general security. In general security feeling, and also the workarounds. How can we do that? After that, just a brief introduction. My name is Sasha, and I'm Microsoft Azure MVP, and as well as MCT and MCT regional lead as well, and also a certified EC Council instructor. But without further ado, let's when we speak about security, let's just say a few things about it, and where it all starts, and what is the to these in these days where we are in the cloud era, and what it in fact has been the biggest issue in modern security today, where we should focus our intentions to secure. What is the biggest, the lowest hanging fruit, where the bad people are targeting our systems most frequently, is these are the users, actually. So it's one comic that actually depicts that very nicely. It's not about poor Dave, it's about all of us, about humans, because we are susceptible to social engineering, and that is where the identities, like ourselves, the users, we are the most susceptible to changes, to security issues, and that's where the bad people, actually the attackers, are focusing their efforts, and everything actually involves around the security of identities, because the identities are today the control plane that we need to control more closely. We have the most of our business today is in the cloud. So even if you haven't moved in the cloud recently, even if you haven't moved the infrastructure in the cloud, you're still using cloud as a person, not as a company. You've been using Gmail, you've been using Google Workspaces, you've been using Office 365, or Outlook.com, or Yahoo. So these are all cloud resources. These are all cloud. This is all cloud infrastructure. Although it is a software as a service, it is not one package like Office 365, or it's not the collective infrastructure for the company like Azure infrastructure, but it's still cloud. So whether we like it or not, we have started using the cloud many years ago, and these cloud infrastructure, the cloud data centers, not just Microsoft, but Amazon and Google and so on, are heavily protected. So these infrastructures have multiple layers of security, numerous layers of security, beginning from the infrastructural, beginning from the architectural part as well, from the design part, and then spanning to the infrastructure there that is installed, where we store our files, our emails, and afterwards, as we choose to go with a company in the cloud where we store our servers and websites, etc. So in Microsoft case, Microsoft is investing billions of dollars yearly in cybersecurity, and it's that also encompasses not just the software security but also hardware and facility security. And for example, if you go in some facilities, generally in for cloud providers, there are even multiple factors of authentication where you actually have to perform a retina scan, or where you have of course pins, password cards and everything, but they also in certain circumstances are measuring your weight. So when you go inside the facility, and measuring your weight when you go outside the facility. So of course, cameras are installed everywhere, from the back of the racks, from on the front of the backs, and so on. And this security in here is very hard to breach, and this is in fact very difficult target for attackers, that it's not returning, that doesn't give a very good return on investment, and it is very time consuming, it is very expensive to go and try to breach something like that. So instead, the attackers actually are trying to focus on the lower hanging fruit, and that are we. And this also, the cloud power can have also made possible an evolution of crime as a service as well, where we are now able to, with non-knowledge but with certain monetary investment, purchase the crime services that are not so expensive today. So we still have a lot of services available that are at the reach of our hands. So here they or exploits, or DDoS services, and proxy services, or ransomware services, and so on. So email campaigns, you can buy an email campaign that will send out the phishing emails in millions, and they actually in some cases they are giving you a service level agreement, if we can say that this is possible within the criminal world, that you will have a certain return on investment. So instead of it, this is just an overview of what is out there and what is possible, and certainly no attacker actually wants to spend a lot of money, and it's all about balance. So it's all about having in return more than what you invested in. So in this case, the attacks are getting more and more complex. The attacks, especially on identities, are getting more complex. And to achieve the better security, we actually don't need to focus solely on identities, but in securing all other aspects and services and features and infrastructure that we have, to achieve actually the multi-layered onion-like security that is doing two things. We are actually raising the we want to ruin the return on investment of the bad guys, bad people, of the attackers, and deter them from actually trying to attack us in every aspect. That's why we have to have the holistic approach to security, whether it's software as a service or platform as a service. We've moved from the common let's say, not a hotel room like in this picture, but also from the on-premises. We've moved to the to the cloud, and in this case, we see the common cloud adoption strategy that actually compares buying a either private house or room in a hotel. That's the same in the cloud. We still have a lot of different tiers, and different tiers also include different responsibilities that are both placed on either a cloud provider or we as a buyer or consumer. And in these different tiers, we still need to have different approaches to security and to secure our services. So in more general way, where we had the legacy IaaS applications, and in this case, where we transition to the more complicated, more advanced, let's say, tiers, then different security approaches also are needed. The cloud, in this case, in Microsoft case actually, and in Azure, gives you the possibility to add multiple layers of security at various stages of the implementation, and also at various products, and including as many of these as possible is actually where we ruin the attacker's return on investment and increase time for the attacker to gain to our assets. And therefore also we raise the possibility for the attacker to leave traces and to be noticed. Within the first things that we should think about and worry about is also giving the correct permissions to our users, and this is something that is called just enough administration, and that is nothing new, but it's the old school from on-premises translated to the cloud, where it's even more critical to enforce the just enough administration, and as well just-in-time administration as well. So we have different tools that we can use to do that. So role-based access controls are the controls that control access to the resources, and no account, nor entity, nor user or service account should be given more of the permissions than it needs for successfully resolving the duties that it has to do. For example, if an application needs to access if a web app only needs to access the SQL server in the background, in the backend, then we should actually just give the permissions on that resource and not on the others, and restrict these. So if we don't have out-of-the-box rules, built-in RBAC rules, then we can always create our own rule and tighten up security in a little bit better way. Then there are also management groups, especially very important when we have multiple subscriptions that we should have, as well as for security purposes, but also for the billing purposes. So if we have more than one subscription, then these should be also organized by management groups, and these are the, let's say, containers that can contain multiple subscriptions, and these are important because these also share permissions and policies across multiple subscriptions that therefore also affect how can we control access to the various resources. So if we have one subscription that is that our developers are using, and the other one that the research is using, then there shouldn't be overlap in permissions, and therefore also management of these subscriptions and resources will be easier when we set up all these in management groups. So we still have the root management group, which is the top one. We also have the top level management groups, and also the management group that is limited or not limited to what we have. So we can to what access we want to control. So we can have multiple of these available, and as well within the root management group, we still have to carefully select what items we apply to the entire enterprise, because it's the inheritance of the roles of the permissions actually goes from root management group to the parent management groups, and to subscriptions, then to resource groups, and to the resources themselves. So we should, especially when we apply policies and RBAC controls to these resource groups, we still have to think about these as well, and how these are inherited, and make sure that no one actually gets more than it's needed. Then we have also access reviews, and the access review is actually a part of the privileged identity management. The access review actually means that we are reviewing regularly what users have privileged identities enabled and assigned. With privileged identity management, Azure Active Directory, actually privileged identity management, or PIM, is the feature of the Azure Active Directory Premium P2 subscription, or it is also part of the EMS, Enterprise Management and Security E5, as well as Office 365 E5 or Microsoft 365 E5 offering, including the Active Directory Identity Protection, and where the Active Directory Privileged Identity Management has the access reviews, where we can scan through all the scan and search for privileged accounts, the accounts that have privileged roles enabled or attached, assigned actually. And after the reviews are done, after the scan and search for these accounts are scanned and the review is made, we can then see how many users, which users are actually consuming their privileged permissions or accounts regularly or irregularly. So if we find out that we have like 50 users that have various ranges of privileged identities, privileged accounts assigned, then if we see that out of these 50, like 45 or 40 are not regularly using the administrative accounts, then we can downgrade, let's say, these users, and instead of making them being administrators permanently, we can make them administrators only when they request to be administrators, or when they request for their permissions to be raised on the administrative level. So, or on the other hand, we can strip them away from their administrative privileges. In this case, we can also set up that the manager that is approver that is approving these requests for raising the privileges also sees when approves and sees the reason why a certain person needs to raise its its privileges to a privileged account, and that is also time bound. So these privileges are expire, or the privileged accounts return back to be normal accounts without administrative privileges after a certain period expires. So that's the just in time administration for the account, for the identities, and as well as just enough administration if we implement a correct Active Directory roles. This is also very important because the if a user that needs to elevate its credentials to the administrative level gets their its credentials stolen, then there's a less harm done than if it was the user that had the permanent administrative role enabled. So in this case, even if that person wants to perform some administrative action, it has to first ask for elevation of privileges, which manager has to approve and therefore deny approval if it finds out that the account has been compromised. One important thing also is to ensure that the legacy protocols are not used, or at least that are not used all of the legacy protocols. We can see if we look at the at the Sentinel, and for example, in Azure Sentinel, we can see the actual usage of these insecure protocols, but also we can then perform some actions actually and to disable these insecure protocols, or at least decommission them and start using the protocols and the applications that use the secure protocols. So for example, the security defaults of the Azure Active Directory tenant. It's one good way to start if we don't have the time to discover and to apply one very one very quick resolution would be, of course, we should know what we're doing. We could apply turn on the setting in Active Directory, which is the turning on security defaults, which actually also limits the insecure protocols, turns on the multi-factor authentication, and so on. So we should restrict or disable these, but of course, in Azure Sentinel, there's the insecure protocol analysis available that we can use to see which applications are using which users, and what applications are using this, and of course act accordingly. What is also very important is the regulatory compliance, and that is also something that we should strive to be compliant on. And this is the security center where we actually are using this. So the regulatory compliance. Let's go quickly and go to the regulatory compliance. And oh, there it is. So the regulatory compliance in Security Center is in here. So we can see all the regulatory compliance standards that currently we are using or evaluating. So we can choose the ISO, PCI, DSS, or SOC, and so on, and see where how are we standing on the compliance standpoint. So we can also check for every other ISO, for example, or PCI and Azure CIS, etc., etc. So each of our subscriptions should be evaluated and also dealt with all the compliance issues here that we have. So well, as well, the different things are also recommendations, but these are the different parts of the security center that we are talking about. But the compliance is something that it's also very important if you want to achieve the higher level of security. And for helping us with achieving the compliance, Azure Blueprint services are here, or Azure Blueprint also will help us to achieve a compliance, especially if we multiply, if we have multiple subscriptions, or if we have multiple offices or Azure tenants that we need to make compliant for the first one that we made. So once we made a compliance policy, once we define all the permissions, when we define all the role-based access controls or policies, then we can use the Azure blueprints to copy and paste, like the architectural design is used to make a design in architecture. Then we can use these blueprints to apply all previously defined policies, RBAC controls, and so on to different tenants and to different subscriptions, for example. In this case, we also have to achieve the compliance for the organization and also be more secure. We have the possibility to use Azure Policy, and that Azure Policy is actually the service that enables us to define what are we allowed to use in, for example, in a resource group, or in when we deploy virtual machines, or when we provision certain resources. So we can limit the provision of certain tiers of products like virtual machines. We can restrict usage of resources in certain regions that are not compliant to our policies, or we can enforce simple naming conventions, for example, and so on. The policy lifecycle, it's really important also to have. So we need to define the policy definitions, the implementation, where these definitions will be applied, who will review them eventually, and also what the policy will these policies will stay. And of course, once we define the policy and apply them, we need to reevaluate them afterwards and assess them for the compliance purposes, to make sure that we still are aligned with the corporate policy, with the compliance policy standards, and also business as well. And these policies also shouldn't hinder our users to work with resources, but in fact, as the role-based access controls control the access to the specific resources, these in fact, let's say, filter out what we can do. Let's say instead of 10 virtual machine sizes or regions, we can just define that a specific departments are allowed only to use a specific values. We can enforce tags and allow locations and so on and so on. So these are the different tools that different examples of what we can enforce with the Azure policies. And to have also to be more secure in this cloud days, we do have two products that are also very important: Azure Security Center and Sentinel, that both each of these products are tailored to address specific parts of the attack chain, and Azure Security Center is used to identify and then protect our assets, of course, and to detecting part, as well as the Azure Sentinel. We have the possibility to respond and to recover, of course, and to remediate, to detect firstly, and to automate our responses to the attacks that we might have. And what we've seen that also we should have a tiered approach of the security perspective, or the security approach. So we should group our accounts based on the type of the access, based on whether it's the operational or data access or administrative privileges. So the highest privileged accounts should be also have the tightest controls, as well as the others should be protected accordingly. But the more important part is just enough administration, and not giving the people the more than they just need, more permission that they just need to do what they have to do. And also in connection to the privileged identity management is also doing the having the right number of administrative accounts. Of course, we still have to have one or more accounts that are, let's say, break glass accounts, and these break glass accounts are the accounts that, for example, if we have provisioned the multi-factor authentication or some conditional access policies that are in fact the best way to enforce these multi-factor authentication policies. We should also have some on break glass account that is account that doesn't have any policy applied, or that that doesn't have multi-factor authentication enforced. But in this case, this account should be protected by not being, but having a very, very strong password, and not used at all, unless something happens. That's why this break glass account access is called. So this is just a safe net for ourselves. According to several studies, not just one, but several studies, these multi-factor authentication, any kind of multi-factor authentication, provides almost 99.9% of protection against identity attacks. And today, Microsoft has the multi-factor authentication offering for free. Before we had to pay for it, but now it's free. And what we should also have is also think about at least having a passwordless authentication, and that is the using a authenticator app, or Windows Hello, or any kind of hardware key, for example, like FIDO2 key or Yubico, for example, that enables us to log in without actually typing the password, so reducing the attack surface. So or the PIN, even if we use it as a Windows Hello, it's even better than typing the password on the screen. And the best way to protect our assets is also to enforce the multi-factor authentication is to use the conditional access. But then we have also the possibility to set this up individually, but it's the management overhead that is actually the drawback of it. But the automatic thing is, and the best way to enforce it is the conditional access, definitely. And there's also one thing that the attackers strive to strive to get your data, and that data is practically unprotected when it leaves the security perimeter, and when it gets out of the enterprise. And fortunately, we also have the possibility to protect the data that also is outside the enterprise. And the sensitive information that we use also should be tiered up and used and protect accordingly. So that sensitive information has the we can protect it with Azure Information Protection, or well, today the portal will be also in the labeling will be, it is integrated, of course, with Office 365, but there is the tendency to move that information and portal and setting up into the Office Microsoft 365 portal. The protection of sensitive information starts with the tenant and then spans the lifetime of the files when the files are actually moving around, beginning with, for example, OneDrive or SharePoint, or with our laptops. But these files can be also the protection of files can be also automated, and when the files leave our organization, these files are also protected from the prying eyes or from the non-authorized users by using a encryption that is today even better, because it's cloud authenticated, and it's since we can everyone actually can reach the cloud resource for authentication. We can therefore have more information about how the content is consumed. We can monitor the shared content. We can restrict access, and afterwards it has been out. And also, as I said, it doesn't the protection doesn't begin when the file actually leaves outside the estate, the enterprise, but also when before it leaves, by including the data loss protection policies in the protection scheme and so on. So how the modern policy, modern information protection policy works, it's very easy. So once we share a file outside, the document owner actually, once we authorize the access, then the consumer actually opens the file, but in between accesses the Azure Active Directory, which is now available for authorization and authentication, which wasn't before we had the Active Directory rights management service that was on-prem, which was practically hardly usable outside. But now we have a very robust solution for using that. So and there's also a free information protection client that we can leverage to use it and outside the corporate boundaries, as well as as individuals as well. But if we use the company protection, then we have other tools as well, for example, like classification scanners and so on, that can scan for files that are there on premises or in the cloud, and then apply the certain protection. So we have different classification scenarios. We can automatically classify, we can recommend or reclassify depending on the need. And the supported formats are very vast. Natively, it's supported in Microsoft Office or in the third-party tools like Adobe, AutoCAD, or partners like Foxit, etc., etc. And well, these examples show us how can we automatically protect our assets. For example, we can see the bar on top, and actually as we type an information, then this can be automatically detected. For example, if we type a credit card number and any kind of information, this information can be detected if we used a specific collector identifier inside, or if we wrote our own, then we are able to either reclassify or enter the justification if we deem it's not correct and tailored to our needs. And these protections also are intertwined and tied within the entire portfolio, within the Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, on OneDrive for Business, etc., etc. And specifically, information protection today is more important, and since it's tighter integration with Office 365 means that we can protect the files and the assets of the organization before actually before these documents actually even leave the organizational boundaries. We have data loss protection rules that can detect any of these sensitive types in different scenarios. We can set then different actions, encrypting files, blocking files to leave the organization, notifying administrators, and perform automatic actions on the files that are used, and so on.